My father stood in the doorway of my studio apartment, his eyes scanning the cramped space with barely concealed disappointment. On my second-hand table lay the collection notice from my university, red letters screaming $45,000 in bold type. Behind him, my mother clutched her designer purse, the one that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "We've talked about this, Sarah." My father's voice was measured, practiced. "We can't just throw money at your problems every time things get difficult. This isn't throwing money away." My voice cracked despite my best efforts to stay calm. "This is my MBA. If I don't pay off the undergraduate debt, they'll drop me from the program. I'm 3 months from graduation. My name is Sarah, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a marketing coordinator in Vancouver while pursuing my MBA at night. It's a brutal schedule, but it's supposed to be my ticket out of entry-level jobs and student debt that's followed me since I was 22. My parents live an hour away in West Vancouver, in the house where I grew up, the one with the view of the mountains and the heated pool my father installed when Mark was in high school. Mark, my younger brother, 24, fresh out of undergrad with a business degree he barely scraped through, working for a tech startup that may or may not actually do anything productive. You should have planned better. My mother's contribution to the conversation. You knew you had debt. Why would you take on more by doing this MBA? Because I need it. Because my bachelor's degree in communications isn't getting me anywhere. Because every job posting wants experience I don't have and qualifications I can't afford. Because I thought you'd understand that investing in education is investing in future success. The $45,000 wasn't arbitrary. It was the exact amount of undergraduate loans still hanging over me, loans that my parents refused to co-sign when I was 18 because they wanted me to learn financial responsibility. Loans that I'd been paying down slowly while living in progressively worse apartments and eating progressively cheaper food. Loans that were now preventing me from completing the one thing that might actually change my life. "Have you looked into more loans?" my father asked. "Payment plans?" I'd looked into everything. The interest rates were predatory. The payment plans would take decades. Most lenders wouldn't touch me because I was already drowning. The university had been clear. Clear the debt or lose your spot in the program. No exceptions, no extensions. I've exhausted every option. This is my last chance. I'll pay you back. I'll sign a contract. I'll give you interest, whatever you want. My parents exchanged one of those looks that married couples develop over decades, the kind that communicates entire conversations without words. "Sarah, honey." My mother's voice took on that gentle, condescending tone I'd come to hate. "We have to think about our own financial security. We're not getting any younger. We have retirement to consider." I wanted to scream. My father was a senior manager at a construction firm. My mother had worked as a dental hygienist until she retired at 55. They owned their house outright. They had pension plans and RRSPs and all the financial security they needed. But I didn't scream. I stood there in my 300-square-foot apartment that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs, and I watched my parents prepare to walk away from the best investment they could make in their daughter's future. "We'll think about it." My father's tone made it clear the thinking was already done. They left shortly after. I didn't cry until I heard their car pull away. Then I sat on my IKEA futon and let myself feel the full weight of watching my dreams die in real time. The next day was worse. I had to meet with my academic advisor to discuss options. Dr. Chen was sympathetic but firm. The university had policies. Without clearing the debt, I couldn't register for my final semester courses. Without those courses, no degree. No degree meant the last 18 months of night classes, weekend assignments, and sacrificed social life meant nothing. I spent that week calling every family member I could think of. My Aunt Lisa sent $200. My cousin James offered $500. My grandmother, living on a fixed income, insisted on contributing $1,000 despite my protests. I appreciated every single dollar, but I needed $45,000. I was trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon. Then came the phone call from Mark. "Sarah, oh my God, you won't believe this." His voice was practically vibrating with excitement. "What?" "Mom and Dad just told me. They're buying a vacation property. Like, an actual vacation home on Vancouver Island. It's right on the water. Has a private dock. 3 bedrooms. It's incredible." The world tilted slightly. "That's great, Mark." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "And the best part? They're putting it in my name. Something about tax purposes and investment property. But basically, it's going to be mine to use whenever. I'm thinking of having a huge summer party out there. You should come." "How much?" The question came out before I could stop it. What? How much did it cost? Oh, I think Dad said $180,000. But it's an investment, you know? The property values in Tofino are skyrocketing. $180,000. 4 times what I'd begged for. Spent on a vacation home for my 24-year-old brother who still called me to ask how to do laundry. That's amazing, Mark, I said, because what else could I say? Congratulations. I hung up and stared at my collection notice. The red numbers seemed to pulse with a life of their own. 45,000. 180,000. The math was simple. The message was simpler. They had the money. They'd always had the money. They just didn't think I was worth it. The university dropped me from the program 2 weeks later. I received the email at work, read it in the bathroom stall, and somehow made it through the rest of my shift without falling apart. That night, I applied for a full-time position at my company, abandoning any pretense that I was just a part-time employee pursuing education. I needed the money. I needed the benefits. I needed something to replace the future I'd just lost. My parents called once to check in. My mother's voice was cheerful, oblivious. Mark told us about the MBA situation. That's too bad, honey. But maybe it's for the best. Not everyone is cut out for graduate school. You're still young. You have plenty of time to figure things out. Figure things out. As if my carefully planned path had been a whim. As if losing my spot in the program was some minor inconvenience rather than the death of everything I'd been working towards. Did Mark tell you about the property? My mother continued, not waiting for my response. We close next month. Your father and I are so excited. It's going to be wonderful for family gatherings. Family gatherings. The kind I was never invited to because I was always working, always studying, always trying to claw my way up from the bottom while they spent money on docks and mountain views. The months that followed were a study in quiet desperation. I watched my college friends advance in their careers, their MBA credentials opening doors that remained firmly closed to me. I stayed at my marketing coordinator position, while people younger than me were hired as managers because they had the qualifications I couldn't afford to get. I moved to an even cheaper apartment. I sold my car and took transit everywhere. I picked up freelance work on weekends, designing social media campaigns for small businesses that paid peanuts, but at least paid something. The $45,000 in debt still loomed, but I was making the minimum payments, keeping my head just barely above water. My parents' Facebook was a constant source of torture. Photos of the vacation home in various stages of decoration. My mother's posts about finding the perfect furniture, the best linens, the ideal kayaks for the dock. My father's proud announcements about property values increasing. Mark's endless stream of photos from parties at the house, his friends lounging on the deck with craft beer and expensive sunglasses. In one photo, my mother had written, "So blessed to have this beautiful place to make family memories." I hadn't been invited to a single one of those memory-making sessions. A year after I'd been dropped from the MBA program, I ran into Dr. Chen at a coffee shop. She remembered me, asked how I was doing, seemed genuinely sad when I told her I was still stuck at the same job. Before we parted, she mentioned that they'd changed the debt policy. Students could now defer undergraduate loans while completing graduate programs. The policy change came 6 months too late for me. I went home and cried for the first time in months. Time moved forward because that's what time does. I dated briefly. Relationships that went nowhere because I was too bitter, too exhausted, too focused on survival to invest in connection. I watched my friends get engaged, buy homes, start families. I attended their weddings in dresses I'd bought at thrift stores and gave gifts I couldn't afford because that's what you do. Mark got promoted at his startup. My parents threw him a celebration dinner at an expensive restaurant in Yaletown. I was invited this time, sat through 3 hours of toasts and congratulations, listened to my father give a speech about how proud he was of his son's ambition and drive. When I left that night, my mother hugged me and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetie. Your time will come." But my time had already come and gone. It had come when I was 28 and desperate. It had gone when my parents chose a vacation home over their daughter's education. I started keeping a record. Not for any particular reason at first, just a document on my laptop where I'd write down things I noticed. The amount they spent on renovating the vacation home's kitchen, $15,000. The cost of the new boat my father bought to keep at the dock, $28,000. The professional landscaping for the property, $8,000. I added it up sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep. The running total of money spent on a property that sat empty most of the year while I worked 2 jobs and lived in a basement suite with black mold growing in the bathroom. 3 years after losing my MBA spot, I finally paid off the undergraduate debt. It took every spare penny I had, but I did it. I called my parents to tell them, expecting some acknowledgement, some recognition that I'd accomplished something difficult. My mother's response: "That's wonderful, honey. Now, maybe you can start saving for a down payment on a condo." Mark and his girlfriend are looking at places in Kitsilano. Of course they were. And of course my parents were probably going to help with that down payment. I took on more freelance work. I built a side business doing social media consulting, working nights and weekends, trading my health and sanity for incremental progress. I was promoted at my day job, not to manager but to senior coordinator. It came with a 5% raise that barely covered inflation. I also started watching my parents' financial situation more carefully. Not out of malice initially, just morbid curiosity. My father complained occasionally about work, about how the construction industry was becoming more competitive, about companies undercutting each other on contracts. My mother mentioned that their investment portfolio had taken some hits, but they still took expensive vacations, still threw elaborate parties, still lived like people without financial concerns. Then, 4 years after I'd been dropped from the MBA program, the real estate market in Vancouver shifted. It didn't crash exactly, but it corrected. Property values that had been climbing for decades suddenly plateaued, then dropped. Vacation properties were hit especially hard. People couldn't afford second homes anymore. The listings piled up. I heard about it through Mark, who'd called me for the first time in months. "Sarah, do you know any real estate agents? Dad's trying to sell the Tofino place and it's been on the market for 6 months with no offers." "Why are they selling?" "I don't know. Financial stuff. They won't really talk about it, but I think things are tight." I made some calls. Not to help, really. More to understand. What I learned was interesting. My father's company had been struggling. Several major contracts had fallen through. There'd been layoffs, including my father, though he'd been given a severance package. He'd tried consulting but couldn't command his previous salary. He'd turned 63 and wasn't as hireable as he used to be. My mother's pension was smaller than they'd anticipated. Some investment advisor had put too much of their retirement fund in risky stocks that tanked. And the vacation home, their $180,000 investment, was now worth maybe $100,000 in a buyer's market. They owed $90,000 on the mortgage they'd taken to buy it, plus property taxes they were struggling to pay. The math wasn't in their favor. I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I started monitoring the foreclosure listings, not actively hoping for their failure, but curious to see if it would come to that. It did. 6 months later, I saw the listing. Their vacation home, scheduled for foreclosure auction, starting bid $75,000. I'd been saving for 6 years. Every freelance dollar, every raise, every tax return. I had $80,000 in the bank. Not enough for a down payment on anything in Vancouver, but enough for this. I did research. Attended the auction as an observer first, learned the process. Came back a week later when their property was scheduled. There were only 3 bidders. The starting bid was $75,000. I waited, patient, letting the other 2 fight it out. They pushed it to $82,000 before one dropped out. The remaining bidder and I went back and forth. He dropped at $90,000. I won the property at $92,000, $2,000 more than they owed on the mortgage. I didn't tell them it was me. The foreclosure went through. They lost the house. I gained a vacation property in Tofino. The phone call came 2 weeks later. My father's number, which I almost didn't answer. "Sarah." His voice sounded older than I remembered. "Tired. We need to talk." "About what?" "We're in some financial difficulty. We lost the Tofino property and things are tight. Your mother's been having some health issues, and the medications aren't fully covered. We were wondering if you might be able to help us out with a loan. Just temporary, until we get back on our feet." "How much?" "We owe about $70,000 on the house. If we can't pay, we'll lose it. But anything would help. Even $10,000 or $15,000 would buy us some time." $70,000. More than the $45,000 I'd needed. "I'll think about it," I said, echoing his words from 6 years ago. "Sarah, please, this is serious. We're your parents." "I know exactly who you are," I said and hung up. I didn't contact them for 3 weeks. During that time, I checked the foreclosure listings again. Their primary residence, the house I'd grown up in, was indeed scheduled for auction. I also did more research, looked into their complete financial situation as thoroughly as I could from the outside. They had equity in the house, about $200,000 worth, but they owed $70,000. If they lost it to foreclosure, they'd walk away with maybe $120,000 after fees and penalties, enough to rent somewhere modest. Not enough to maintain their lifestyle. Mark called me, which was unusual enough to be notable. "Sarah, have you talked to Mom and Dad? They're really struggling. I've been helping out where I can, but I'm trying to save for my wedding, and Jessica's student loans are brutal." Mark was getting married. Of course he was. "I've talked to them," I said carefully. "Are you going to help? They're really counting on you. Family should help family, right? Family should help family." The irony wasn't lost on me. On the 21st day, I called my father back. "I've been thinking about your situation," I said without preamble. "Thank God. Sarah, you don't know what this means. I'm willing to help, but we need to meet. All of you. You, Mom, and Mark. I want to discuss this in person." "Of course, absolutely. When? Where?" "Your house. Tomorrow at 2. The next afternoon, I arrived at my childhood home with a folder under my arm. My parents looked diminished somehow, smaller than I remembered. My mother had more gray hair. My father's clothes hung loose on a frame that had lost weight from stress. Mark looked uncomfortable, dressed too casually for what I'd implied was a serious meeting. "Thank you for coming," my father started. "We appreciate you taking the time." I set my folder on the dining room table, the same table where we'd had family dinners, where I'd done homework, where my parents had once told me they were proud of my acceptance to university. "Before we discuss anything, I need to show you something." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. A printout of my university's debt collection notice from 6 years ago. "Do you remember this? June 2019. I came to you and asked for $45,000 to clear my undergraduate debt so I could finish my MBA. You told me you couldn't afford it." My mother's face paled slightly. "Sarah, we've been over this." "Have we? Because I don't think we have. Not honestly." I pulled out another paper. A screenshot from my father's Facebook, dated 3 weeks after they'd refused me. My parents standing in front of a vacation home, arms around each other, huge smiles. "This is the property you bought in Tofino. Purchase price, $180,000. Exactly 4 times what I needed. Bought 3 weeks after you told me you had to think about your financial security." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "That was different," my father said. "That was an investment." "Was it?" I pulled out more papers, laying them methodically on the table. Renovation costs, $15,000. Boat purchase, $28,000. Furniture, $12,000. Should I continue? "What do you want from us?" My mother's voice was small. "An apology? A start, but not the end. I want you to acknowledge, right here, right now, that you had the money when I needed it. That you chose a vacation home over my education. That you chose Mark's comfort over my future." Silence filled the room like something physical. "We thought." My father started, then stopped. "We thought you'd figure it out." I did figure it out. I figured out that I wasn't worth investing in. I figured out that Mark mattered more. I figured out that your priorities were crystal clear. I pulled out my final document, a deed, for the Tofino property. "Do you know who bought your vacation home at foreclosure auction?" They stared at me. I did. "For $92,000, $2,000 more than you owed." My mother made a small sound. "You," my father said flatly. "Me, the daughter who wasn't worth $45,000 now owns your $180,000 investment property. Funny how that worked out." Mark found his voice. "That's cold, Sarah. Is it cold to buy a property at auction? Is it cold to let the market work? Or is it cold to watch your daughter's dreams die while you buy boats?" I stood up, smoothing down my dress. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm willing to give you $70,000 to save your house. But there are conditions. Anything," my father said quickly. "We'll sign whatever you want. The first condition is that you acknowledge what you did. Out loud. That you had the money when I needed it, and you chose not to help me." My parents looked at each other. "We had the money," my mother whispered. "We should have helped you. We were wrong." My father nodded stiffly. "We made a choice. It was the wrong choice." I turned to Mark. "And you?" "I didn't know," Mark said. "I didn't know they'd refused you. But you never wondered why I wasn't at all those parties at the house? Never thought it was strange that I never came to this beautiful family property?" He had no answer. "The second condition is that I'm keeping the Tofino property. Consider it the education you wouldn't pay for. Consider it payment for 6 years of struggling while you posted photos of your blessed life." "You can't be serious," my father said. "Completely serious. You wanted to teach me financial responsibility. Consider this my graduation. The third condition is that after today, we have minimal contact. I'll show up for major events if I feel like it. But no more weekly dinners, no more guilt trips about family obligations. You'll have your house, but you won't have unlimited access to me. Sarah, my mother's eyes filled with tears. We're family. Family is supposed to help each other, I said. That's what you told me, right, Mark? I pulled out a check I'd prepared. $70,000. Made out to my father. There's a contract next to the check. It formalizes the loan terms. 20-year repayment at 3% interest. You'll pay me back every penny, just like I paid back those student loans you wouldn't help with. My father picked up the contract with shaking hands. One more thing, I said. I'm sending an email to the family. Aunt Lisa, Cousin James, grandmother. Everyone who helped me when I needed it. I'm telling them exactly what happened, how much I needed, how much you spent on the vacation home, and how you chose. They deserve to know who they're dealing with. You wouldn't, my mother said. Watch me. I collected their signatures on the contract. My father's was barely legible. My mother kept crying. Mark looked like he wanted to disappear. You have your money. You keep your house. I keep the vacation property and my self-respect. We all get something. I walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Dad? That property you taught me to think about as an investment? You were right. Property values are rising again. That $92,000 purchase is now worth about $140,000, so thank you for the education. It was expensive, but worth every penny. I left them sitting at that dining room table, staring at the check that would save them and the contract that would remind them of their choices for the next 20 years. I sent the email that night. Detailed, chronological, with documentation. Aunt Lisa responded within an hour, horrified. Cousin James called, angry on my behalf. My grandmother sent a one-line email. I always knew something was wrong. The email spread the way truth tends to spread. Through family networks, through my parents' social circles. My mother's book club friends saw it. My father's former colleagues heard about it. The country club they'd struggled to maintain membership in suddenly had conversations go quiet when they entered. Mark texted me once. Was it worth destroying them? I replied, ask them if destroying my future was worth a vacation home. He didn't respond. 6 months later, I stood on the deck of the Tofino property, watching the sunset over the Pacific. I'd spent some of my savings renovating, updating, making it truly mine. It was beautiful. More than that, it was proof that I'd survived what they'd done to me. My parents made their first loan payment on time. $70,000 at 3% interest over 20 years meant they'd pay me back around $91,000 total. Not quite enough to cover the $45,000 plus 6 years of interest and lost opportunities, but closer than they deserved. I rented the property out on Airbnb most of the time. It generated enough income to cover the property taxes and maintenance with profit left over. Money I invested carefully, building the financial security my parents had claimed they needed to protect. Some people told me I'd been cruel. That real forgiveness meant letting go, helping without conditions. But those people never lost their shot at graduate school while their brother got a vacation home. They never had to choose between groceries and textbooks while their parents posted about being blessed. They never had to bury their dreams at 28 because family didn't think they were worth the investment. I gave my parents what they asked for, on terms that reflected what they'd taught me. That money matters more than relationships. That some people are worth investing in and others aren't. That family is conditional. They taught me financial responsibility. I gave them a 20-year lesson in consequences. I moved forward into a life they'd never fully be part of, carrying the weight of what they'd done but no longer crushed by it. The vacation home sat on Vancouver Island, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't refusing to help. It's helping in a way that ensures they never forget what they cost you.